From the heart of Central Florida, you are listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. Glad to be with you once again in our Central Florida neighborhood, where the problems we have, hey, they're not that hard to solve. We gotta roll our sleeves up and solve problems together as neighbors, not groupthink, not tribalism, not blame games. That's yesterday's news. You know what's today? A neighbor's choice. The choice you and I have to make each day to think for ourselves, to think in a way that puts our families first, our communities first, and not some kind of loyalty to some distant, far-off city like D.C., or even worse, some kind of globalist policy from some global agency like the WHO. We don't have time for that stuff. They may be well-intended, but so was Sauron, too, in Lord of the Rings. He just wanted to build a better neighborhood, and look what he did with the place. And so that's what we have to deal with every day, is the tyranny of good intentions. And I think a lot of this has to go back to how we were raised and how we were catechized. You'd heard that word catechesis? You talk about catechism school when you're in maybe going to Catholic church or whatever. It's what you do to learn the faith. Well, how are kids mostly catechized today? They're catechized by the state. They learn their faith, their trust in institutions and the way things should be done through the state. And they learn it starting at a young age, and kindergarten, and all the way up to their adulthood when they turn 18. And then, you know, when they come home from school, they've got lots of homework to do, and they've got a media that is so sycophantically worshiping of the state. And a cinema, you know, movies, Hollywood movies are often making the state look wonderful. And they get their entertainment choices curated in a way that is state worshiping. And then they go to college, and they get the same thing in college. They get the worship of state, and it's turned up. The older they get, the worship is more flagrant and more obvious and more transparent. The mask slips. The older the child is when they go from young to high school and on to college. By that point, they're totally stripped of any common sense, unfortunately, unless they have the ability and the prowess to discern the truth and to be able to engage in bad ideas and pick them apart because of being trained in how to think paradoxically and being trained in how to think with critical thinking and having epistemology, which is how do we know what we know is true. That's something that we should all be teaching our kids, regardless of what kind of education place they're in. But joining me to talk about this is the author of a provocatively titled book that is a new book. Its title is Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? Blake Boles, the author, joins us now. How you doing, Blake?
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. I'm well, thank you.
Well, it's great to have you on the program because this is something we've talked a lot about on our program in various capacities, both in my appearances on other people's programs as well as on this show, which is what are we doing with our education system and what do we need to do to ensure that future generations are not so confused about how to think for themselves?
That's a big question. What do you think, David?
Well, I think the real key for me in this show is that if you add coercion at the root of an institution, it always warps and distorts the outcome. So if you're at the root of the tree, and in this case we're talking about education, and if the root of that tree is poisonous, if it's at its core is based on forcing people to pay for a service that they may want to opt out of and not partake of, and they don't agree with the worldview and the methods and the teaching style, but they're still forced to at the barrel of a gun, basically, because that's what happens if you don't pay the taxes that fund public schools. I think if you get the foundation wrong, if you're basing it on force and the initiation of violence against people, that it will inevitably produce a bad outcome. It will inevitably produce a rotten system with rotten results, because ultimately it's going to create a monopoly where there's not enough competitive pressures to make sure that the service being provided is a quality one that's done at an efficient price.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And a lot of my book is dedicated to talking about giving kids real choice, nurturing their autonomy, and yes, removing coercion in its many forms, many varieties, from your kid's educational environment. Because a kid who learns to do things for themselves, for their own reasons, to be intrinsically motivated, is going to be way more powerful and effective and happy in the long run. And that leads to a better society, in my opinion.
I think so too. So tell me a little bit about your background that got you into the subject of this education.
Yeah, I was not alternatively educated myself. I grew up in California public schools, and I went straight to the University of California at Berkeley to study astronomy and physics. I thought I wanted to be a scientist. But I realized that I actually hadn't thought very hard about what being a research scientist meant, and I was thinking, well, maybe I should be a high school science teacher instead. And that's when I stumbled into some great books that many of them were from former school teachers, public school teachers and private school teachers, who said, you know what, this system is essentially broken. We are not able to do the kind of teaching, the kind of educating that we want, and so we're giving up on it. And the most influential voice for me was a man named John Taylor Gatto, who was a New York City award-winning school teacher, and then he quit after 30 years and said, I don't want to make a living hurting kids anymore. And he started championing homeschooling and alternative schools and all of these small-scale, fairly decentralized, mostly private alternatives to the mainstream school system, both public and private. And he said, this is the future. And that was I had never heard anyone deliver that message before, let alone someone who had won all these awards as a public school teacher. He had really tried his best. And then I discovered more books, something called the Teenage Liberation Handbook, which introduced me to the idea of unschooling. I learned about these radical schools like the Sudbury School model, where kids have genuine choice and autonomy, also within a democratic framework. And I was just swept away and ended up designing my own major to study this stuff full-time. Graduated with the least marketable degree ever offered by Berkeley, but I went into the field that I studied. I stayed in the field of alternative education and ended up working with mostly teenagers who have chosen not to go to regular school.
And like doing tutor work online, or how does that work?
No, I worked at a summer camp called Not Back to School Camp for teenagers, and I also started my own company called Unschool Adventures, a travel company, and I essentially offered cool international travel programs that were pretty long, like 6 weeks long, for groups of teenagers, and I offered them during the school year. And so anyone could sign up, but really the only ones who could plausibly sign up would be homeschoolers or unschoolers. And that became my little laboratory. I got to travel around with cool teenagers. I got to learn about their lives. And then I took what I learned and I turned it into books. And so what we're discussing now is my fourth book, actually. And so the other ones were about how you get into college if you don't go to high school, what you could do instead of going to four-year college to still become a, effective, educated person in the world. And then one about self-directed learning and what that means and what it looks like.
And you mentioned the Sudbury School model. I know we have a school that is in that vein here in the Tampa Bay area, Spring Valley School. SpringValleySchool.com is their website.
Mm-hmm.
And they use the Sudbury method. I'm new to this, but I'm learning about it. Recently, another person, a friend of mine, told me about the Sudbury School. Can you tell us a little bit about that method and how that relates to what you've discovered in your research?
Sure. So the Sudbury Valley School was founded in 1968 in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. And this was during the late 60s, early 70s, when there was a lot of people, very idealistic people, starting these free schools where kids could be free to do whatever they want. And really, most of those schools closed by the end of the 70s. And this school has stuck around, and it has inspired many other people to start similar schools. And so there are Sudbury schools all over the world now. And the premise of the school is when you come here, you are an autonomous, sovereign individual. We, the staff of the school, are not going to try to convince you or coerce you to do anything except to follow the school rules, which are voted on in a very old school New England town hall style democratic meeting using Robert's Rules of Order. And at the school, a 5-year-old and a founding member have the same vote when it comes to essentially every matter of importance at the school. And so kids feel pretty empowered in that way, and also they feel respected because no one is forcing them to do math. No one is forcing them to do anything. And at the same time, the relationships that they have with adults at the school are much more genuine. And when an adult will say something like, well, maybe you should learn some math so you can achieve this goal or dream that you've been talking about, which does actually require some math, or you have to go to college, and so you'll need math for college. And then that young person can take that advice more straightforwardly, instead of assuming that every adult is some sort of authority figure waiting to ambush them.
And do they have mechanisms in place for preventing majority rules from running roughshod over other people's ideas?
Yeah, I believe they do. There's definitely some things. You don't need 51% to vote out the staff and burn the school down. I know that there's mechanisms to prevent overreaches like that. I'm not super familiar to this level of granularity to Sudbury Valley School, but it's definitely a robust model, and it's been replicated enough to make me think, yeah, they know what they're doing.
It's interesting that there is a lot of sacredness about the conversation of school and education. And it's a very taboo subject to raise direct criticism like you're doing. I mean, to say, as you quoted John Taylor Gatto, or paraphrased or what have you, that he was tired of working in a place where he was hurting kids by the system's design. That's a strong charge.
Yeah, I don't expect this to become a bestseller. I wrote it for parents whose kids are clearly not functioning well in school or whatever educational environment that they're in. And to me, that means that they're not really engaged, they're excessively stressed out, and they're probably very bored. So I think those mental health indicators are the best way to evaluate whether a certain educational environment is working or not. And for some kids, homeschooling is not going to work well. For some kids, going to a Sudbury school is not going to work well. Everyone has this idea that there's some sort of one-size-fits-all solution just waiting for us over the horizon. And if we can just discover what that is and we can implement it as a public system, or a private party can implement it as some highly successful private system, then all the problems of education will end. I think that's complete BS, and I put way more faith, like John Taylor Gatto did, in having a very decentralized, largely local, patchwork network of educational solutions, some of which may look like conventional school. Others will look like unconventional school. Some will be home-based. Some will be, we need the whole spectrum. We need Montessori and boot camp military schools. And so that's what I would like to see going down the road. And like you said, we have this faith in the transformative power of school and education systems, but yet we think so monolithically about it, and that's the belief that needs to be killed, and that's what I'm trying to contribute to the discussion with my book.
We're speaking with educator Blake Boles, author of the new book, Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? We'll find out why in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice.
A lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
And now, a message from Vistaprint. This is a cow. The cow that made the milk that was made into the cheese that made Tober Dairy Farm into the talk of the craft fair. But cheese only lasts so long. The impression a small business like Tober Dairy Farm makes can last much longer, with the right business card to back it up. And now Vistaprint is introducing free shipping on all business cards in any quantity. That's right, free shipping on any card, any style, any quantity. Plug your information and logo into hundreds of fresh designs tailored to your type of company, or upload your own original layout. Pick from paper stocks like matte, glossy, or uncoated. You can even upgrade to a unique touch like rounded corners. The choice is yours. The time is now. I said now, not cow, Farmer Tober. For a limited time only, get free shipping on all business cards in any quantity at Vistaprint.com with promo code 2828. That's promo code 2828 at Vistaprint.com. Vistaprint. Own the now.
Man, how can you afford gas for that big SUV?
I pay less for gas than everyone else. I got the free Get Upside Gas app and get up to 25 cents a gallon cash back every time I buy gas.
Hold on. You're getting up to 25 cents off a gallon with the free Get Upside Gas app while I'm paying full price?
You know it. People earned over $1 million last year. You just got to take a picture of your gas receipt and bam, up to 25 cents a gallon cash back.
You don't have to tell me twice. I'm downloading the free Get Upside Gas app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code TRUCK for a 20-cent a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 45 cents a gallon on your next tank. Just download the free Get Upside app at the App Store or Google Play and use promo code TRUCK. Save money on gas on every fill-up. Download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TRUCK. That's TRUCK.
Why are you still sending your kids to school? That's the title of our author today, his book. We have Blake Boles with us. It's unpacking alternatives to schooling and looking at the case for moving out of public schooling in various different ways. Blake, that's one of the things that I think people have a hard time overcoming, is that there's just this inertia that people want to fit in, and people want to ostensibly free babysitter. They've got, and that's not it's not a disparaging way to look at it, but because of the cost of living, because of the massive spending and the debt that has rolled into inflation and taxation and regulation and all the things that retard economic development, that force people to have two jobs. And some of it is also trying to keep up with the Joneses, let's be honest. But that whole combination of factors makes people want to have somebody that ostensibly they got to pay the taxes, so let the experts educate my kid and conveniently keep them in a daycare type situation till they're 18 so that I can pursue my career without having the hindrance. Obviously, with the recent circumstances of the pandemic, that has changed that dynamic a little bit, but how do you overcome that natural desire to first fit in with the herd that parents have. They want their kid to think like other kids. They want their kid to like the same music as other kids, play the same sports, wear the same fashion, and go through the same rituals of bullying and all the stuff that they did, because they think that's part of the ritual of growing up for life. And then at the same time, I'm thinking of the other issue of their own, kid. Let's say a parent says, no, I don't want my kid to go through that, but their kid insists on, well, I'd rather hang out with the cool kids at my local public school. I don't want to do private school or homeschool or whatever.
Well, there's a couple different factors at play here. There's definitely inertia with parents wanting their kids to go through the school system, which seems like a safe bet, and which the parents did themselves as kids, and if it ain't broke, why fix it? There's also a strong sense of this coming from the kids themselves. Kids are, to a large degree, fairly natural conformists, at least until they get into upper adolescence. And so this desire to wear the same clothes or listen to the same music, consume the same culture, that often does come from the kids themselves, too. And so I think when, if you're going to choose to do something radically different, if you're going to choose to homeschool or unschool or send your kid to a really weird-sounding alternative school, there needs to be a pretty strong reason for doing that. And I think that the parents who I've seen make this choice are pretty attuned to their kids and their kids' needs and their welfare. And they're not just handing their kids off to the school system and saying, I don't care what happens there as long as, you're not back before 4 p.m. Unfortunately, that is, I think, how most parents do approach school. And as you said, it's a matter of convenience. And because we have moved in the direction of two parents needing to work in order to make ends meet, it's a very hard thing to escape. That's why I would never say that homeschooling, for example, is an option for everyone, because that's simply not true today. And so if a parent is more attuned to their kid and how they're doing, as I mentioned before, I think that we need to look at engagement and boredom and stress. Those are really powerful indicators. Essentially, you want your kid to be in love with what they're doing, in the same way that as an adult, you would much prefer to be in love with the work that you're doing instead of going to a job that makes you miserable. And that's what we're training kids to do when we don't look carefully at how school is affecting them. We're training them to take jobs that they hate and to live lives that feel often quite irrelevant and meaningless, and that leads to a profound sense of alienation. So if you can tell that your kid is not doing well in school, I think all you need is the courage to take the next step and investigate the alternatives, and you'll see that you're not going to doom your kid by choosing to homeschool or unschool or send them to an alternative school. And in fact, these kids typically will turn out better, at least in those mental health indicators, than they would be doing if they just stayed in the same old school situation.
So how do we begin to make this become more of a mainstream option for people, especially people who, again, they may be of low income or lower middle class? How do we make this more approachable for people so that, this pandemic could be the best start? Obviously, it's not the way homeschooling would be done in a normal situation where people have time to prepare and sort things out and get into it the right way. But nevertheless, it's a breaking of the fourth wall, so to speak, of normalcy, which allows for big changes to start making a gradual shift in the mainstream way of doing things.
Yeah, and I like to say that the homeschoolers who I know tell me right now during the pandemic, we're not homeschooling because we're not able to go out to the park days and hang out with other homeschoolers. We can't go to museums. We can't take field trips. So much of homeschooling happens outside of the home. And so we have a weird situation. It's more like remote schooling right now. But to answer your question, how can we make this more accessible? How can we, incentivize more families to do something outside of the norm? There are some little experiments that are happening in the form of charter schools, hybrid schools, virtual schools. In the book, I highlight a couple schools in Santa Cruz, California that have done an extremely good job where you can essentially have the freedom of a homeschooling family while also being able to access specific resources within the local public school district. And also, there can be a little bit of cash kind of given back, so to speak, to the families who are choosing to do this alternative sort of hybrid charter school. But those are still pretty rare, and I don't have much faith that they're going to proliferate. But I think the idea of disaggregating the public school entity is a good one. I think it's ridiculous that you either have to opt in fully to everything in the public school package, or you have to fully opt out of it. Homeschoolers have won some rights to participate in school sports or after-school activities, but why can't your kid be homeschooled and then choose to go to the one or two classes that they really like, where they have a good connection with the teacher? Like, would that really be disruptive to the system? And that essentially doesn't happen anywhere. And so one way to make it more accessible would be to just make public school more of an a la carte, flexible system instead of you have to take it all or take none of it.
Yeah, and one bill I used to like a lot when Ron Paul was in Congress was this bill, Homeschool Freedom Act or Education Freedom Act, which would give people a tax credit on their income tax that they could use for resources to go to private school or homeschooling. I think that's a really smart idea.
Yeah, tax credits and vouchers have been kicked around for decades now. The homeschooling and alternative education world has a mixed position on that. And actually, that's one of the most interesting things about existing in this world, David, is that you got a lot of people on the right, you have a lot of people on the left, you have a lot of centrists, you have libertarians, you got weirdos, you got socialists. Everyone has some sort of reason for seeing that there is a big problem here with continuing to do business as usual. And that provides for some really rich conversations, but not necessarily a homogenous opinion on something like vouchers or tax credits.
Yeah, what about the idea that people say, well, if you want to open up school choice, what you're really saying is you want greedy, rich corporations and profit seekers and scam artists to come in there and just destroy the foundations of our sacred education?
Well,
because that's how the media shapes it. You know, the media doesn't. They don't take this conversation we're having as some kind of acceptable conversation. Well, we're having it anyways, of course. But.
Yeah, I don't. Sure, I could see that if you completely privatize the school system, for example, there would be a sort of McDonald's of schooling that popped up, and a Walmart of schooling, and they would be, yes, large corporations and conglomerates. And I'm sure many people would have problems with them. But fundamentally, we still live in a country where you can choose not to shop at McDonald's. You can choose not to shop at Walmart. You can pay more money to go to the little boutique or eat at a nice restaurant. And so John Taylor Gatto was a big fan of providing some sort of market mechanisms to incentivize school choice. And I think that's a good direction to go in. This idea of public schools as a sort of ultimate guarantor of social welfare for kids that come from really tough families. I don't think we can abandon that either, because it's true that for some kids, public school is the only place where they will have, a safe place to exist and a warm meal and some caring adults for 7 hours. And so something like that should continue, but why can't it look more like a library? Why can't it look more like, so John Taylor Gatto said, everyone gets behind public libraries and public parks, but so many people have problems with public schools. Why is that? And it's because of compulsion. It's because of force. And so I think that there's a way that we could have more choice, more market mechanisms, while still keeping the sort of historic accomplishment of providing this social welfare opportunity for kids who actually really need that.
And we, and again, even in a totally privatized or free, liberated education system, without even any government fallback, I'm just saying in the most extreme scenario that people can imagine, I think it would be very robustly funded for the poor, because you think about, it's like there are millions of people, civic-minded people, progressive-minded people who are rich, and they bankroll very wealthy campaigns for presidency to provide universal education. And the idea that if we allowed people school choice in the absolute, that those folks, those progressive-minded people, would not donate their millions and their hundreds of thousands and their foundations into providing scholarships abundantly for progressive-minded private schools for poorer folks. I think that would be completely a logical way to more efficiently provide a more quality education experience for even the poorest of folks, you know?
Yeah, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is a huge donor to educational initiatives all over the world. So that's one piece of evidence in favor of your theory, yeah.
Well, very good. We're speaking with Blake Boles. He's the author of Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? And I want to get a little bit into some of the things that you can find out in his book when we return. Things like our secular religion. What is this? And what a degree is really worth. We'll continue in just a moment, live on A Neighbor's Choice. Don't miss it.
A lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania and Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Attorney spokeswoman. If you know anything about NFL or about NCAA basketball or football or NHL or whatever, entertainment television, make sure you make a deposit at betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Again, make a deposit. They've been getting a lot of great response from the Bubba Army. Make your deposit using promo code Bubba100. It's simple. Go to betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Sign up with the Bubba100 code and make that deposit and get your bonus, plus have some fun at the safest wagering site available. Fast, on-time paying their winnings out, incredibly mobile-friendly. And if you haven't already signed up, then go now. Make your deposit at betdsi.com.
Promo code Bubba100.
Bubba100 gets you a special bonus and gets you in the game. Again, www.betdsi.com, and at the promo code portion,
Bubba100.
Bubba100. Thank you.
The opportunity to spend your life having the chance to shepherd a human being into being is a wonderful privilege. And it's hard to imagine how we've continued for so long to treat that privilege so carelessly, to so expeditiously go along with the status quo of sending our kids into situations where we mean well, but when we really think hard about it, it's really inhumane to put people in the kind of situation we end up putting them in into public schools, which oftentimes feel like a kind of a training ground for prison, where you're supposed to pick a team, a clique, and you're supposed to comply with some dehumanizing rules. John Taylor Gatto, the educator, used to say, why does a human being, a sovereign human being, made with sacred image, have to raise their hand to use the restroom to get permission? Very disturbing when you think about it. And this is something that's not really rooted in the best of America's ideals. It's rooted in foreign concepts of industrialized education models and militarized education models that want to put people into cookie-cutter boxes. That's not where Tesla learned, I can tell you that. Tesla, the guy that you enjoy your AC energy with, I can assure you that what he knew to give you your AC energy that you use, your electricity in your house to this day, he didn't get that from a public school, and neither will your smart child that you have by allowing them to be, twiddling their thumbs in a government education center. Our guest is Blake Boles, author of Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? So obviously, Blake, I resonate with your message. There's a few chapters in here that are interesting, and maybe we could just kind of touch upon a few of these themes here. You have a chapter here, they still learn to work hard, and there's a category that says, must we do work we hate? Can you expand on that?
Sure. I think a lot of people see school as the parallel to employment for kids. And they say, well, you might just have to work a job that you hate, so you might as well learn how to do work you hate now. And that is the informal justification for kids saying, this doesn't make any sense to me, this isn't relevant, this homework feels like busy work or make work. And parents can just say, well, suck it up. You have to learn to do stuff you don't like. And I think that if we're going to consider children to be, soon to be full human beings, then we have to hold them to the same standard. And so would we do the same things that we do to kids to other adults? Would we say everyone has to go back to just public school for 3 weeks out of every year to be educated in citizenship and work habits? I mean, that would just be completely unpalatable to people. That would be, fodder for some sort of revolution. Yet that's what we do on a day-to-day basis with kids. And, with really young kids, there might be more of a case to be made for that because they are really, only semi-autonomous people. But when we're talking about adolescents, when we're talking about middle schoolers and high schoolers, these are people who historically have held real responsibilities and done real work and felt like they were able to contribute to their societies. That was the truth of all of human existence up until just maybe 100 years ago. And now, what do we ask them to do? To do some busy work, essentially, for years and years. That is a dehumanizing experience. And so what I argue in that chapter, David, is that, yes, kids should be learning to do work, but the kind of work that we've created for them is just a really bad option. It's like having a really bad bureaucratic, paper-pushing job. That's what we're training them for. And there are so many different ways that kids can learn how to work hard. And I'd say that the best examples are maybe extracurriculars in school, the kind of stuff that makes school worth it for so many kids. Band, drama, sports, robotics, mock trial. This is the stuff where kids, they're allowed to choose to engage with this or not. And then they can get really into it. They're there with other people who are similarly motivated, and they can own their successes and own their failures. And just none of that happens with the typical schoolwork, and that's true for public and private schools. And so I argue that we need to find highly engaging experiences for kids. My background is in outdoor education and summer camp work. Kids always get to choose to go to summer camp, and I think that's the basic reason why summer camps, there's no big drama about summer camps. Kids love to go there. They work hard when they're there because it's a place that they've chosen to be.
Yeah, my favorite teachers growing up were ones that even in private school went off the script. They just went off script of what they were supposed to do and created their own unique experiences. I remember one teacher allowed us to create, each kid could create with building connects materials and create their own car manufacturing, and every kid could form voluntarily a part of this car company. They could do races, they could do demolition derbies, they could do all kinds of things, and they had a bank account and you could make money and all. It was like a whole little economy that we were able to create.
Yeah.
I remember another one, she would create her own curriculum on the fly. She'd create dramatic plays, she'd have debate day where we'd all have to debate, take different sides, and I mean, we were in middle school doing things that you don't do until you're in college usually. And those are the best memories of education, is those off-script moments. And you're saying they should be every step of the way, not just a deviation off script, right?
That should be the curriculum. If you have to have a curriculum, that's it. But already to call that a curriculum is a misnomer, because it can't be written down in books and prescribed. It's very local and small scale, and depends on relationships, on messy human relationships. So teachers need the freedom to innovate, to experiment, and that means the freedom to fail sometimes also, and kids do too.
You've got a section in your book, how to engage a teenager, which probably is something a lot of folks in our audience might want to know some tips for. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that talks a lot about my experience working with kids in wilderness programs, travel programs, and I'd say that for a lot of teenagers, the home environment has become like a way too sheltered and easy and catered to environment. And again, adolescents historically have faced real challenges and held real responsibilities. And so I say give them real challenges and give them real responsibilities. And so that could look like jobs or internships. That could look like living with a family in a foreign country. When I was 14, my dad asked if I would like to live with a family in Chile for a month and only speak Spanish. And I said yes. And I'd only had 1 year of high school Spanish under my belt. But that was an extremely formative experience for many reasons. But from a narrow school point of view, it gave me a reason to focus in my Spanish classes for the next 3 years of high school. I had context. I had relevance. And so I say get kids out of their comfort zones. Give them some challenges where they have some real boundaries. This is why a program like Outward Bound, where they send kids off on 30-day backpacking trips in the wilderness, I have so much success, because when you're out there in the wilderness and you're thinking, do I want to screw off a bit? Do I want to try to push the limits here? What are you going to do? You're going to run away and get, cold and hungry. There's going to be real consequences for your actions. So many kids don't have any real consequences, that they can push any boundary and it doesn't push back. And that is the novel situation that we find ourselves in the 20th and 21st century.
It's interesting, because there's a lot of people probably have the misnomer that when you talk about homeschooling or self-directed education, that's not providing enough boundaries for kids. But here you are talking about how that's not necessarily the case.
Well, I don't think that homeschooling or self-directed education is something you should try to do yourself. It's a big project, and historically kids have been raised as part of communities, as part of villages, and they had non-parental adults around, a lot of them, who would push back a little bit more if the kid is acting like a snot-nosed brat. Parents are inherently biased towards their own kids. They love them, and they don't want to come down really hard on them. And so we need to involve other people in the education of kids, and that's the role that I have played in my adult career. I have been the non-parental adult for lots and lots of adolescents, and that, that allows me to have a more honest and direct role with them, giving them feedback, calling them out on their BS, and kids need that in their lives. And so maybe that's where the disjuncture you're sensing is coming from.
Yeah, it's not about like creating dehumanizing boundaries, but creating kind of natural relational boundaries, right? Where
That's right.
It's interesting. What about the you have a chapter about you can afford to relax about college. I think that's something a lot of people would like to hear.
Yeah, well, the first part of that chapter, I talk about college as our secular religion. The the PayPal founder, Peter Thiel, once said, to question higher education is like telling people there's no Santa Claus. It's the one thing we all believe in, that if you go to college and you get a degree, then you are saved. You have made it. It's your rite of passage. And that is just really disingenuous advice. There are some careers that, yes, because of licensing requirements, you have to have a college degree, or if you want to get into a certain kind of bureaucracy and they will screen you, then yes, you have to have a college degree. But there are so many other ways to make an impact in this world and to make a living that don't require a college degree. And really what we're seeing is just a gross form of credential inflation, and young people, 18-year-olds, being asked to go into debt obscene amounts of money. If we said that, we saw those same amounts on the kid's credit card, we would say this is the most irresponsible kid I've ever seen. But if it's in the form of student loan debt, which is not dischargeable, then we say you are investing in your future. And so I cite a number of researchers that give more complex, detailed analysis, and they say for some kids, college is a good deal. For other kids, it's really not. So stop thinking about it as the one and only path.
Wow, that's a refreshing thing people need to think about, because so much of their lives and the rat race is all about trying to position and jockey for college accounts and for social status markers into prestigious universities. And what you're saying is a breath of fresh air for folks caught up in that rat race, caught up with keeping up with the Joneses. We're speaking with author Blake Boles, author of the new book, Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? Let's think about that as we continue and learn more about our educational system.
A lawsuit is a devastating process for families. It can be an emotional roller coaster ride. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that practices with this in mind. That law firm is Catania and Catania. We know and handle personal injury law for families with care. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania Catania will take care of the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims don't even realize they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to us. Catania and Catania only represent private individuals. We treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's our way of practicing law. It's our commitment to you. Remember, we don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning, over 28 years, and family first. Catania Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Non-attorney spokeswoman. And now, Easy Lift Movers is on the air, reminding all Americans to show support to the brave men and women of our U.S. military. Their bravery and tireless efforts should never go unnoticed. This salute is brought to you by Easy Lift Movers, serving the community with quality and pride. Call the pros today, 813-505-8474. That's 813-505-8474. Also, all troops and veterans will receive a 10% discount. That's Easy Lift Movers, proudly saluting our troops and veterans. They are professionals who care.
Hey, it's Bubba the Love Sponge. With all the coronavirus stuff going on, you've heard the CDC say wash your hands about a zillion times. Studies show that the average person touches their face 23 times an hour. Your nose, eyes, and mouth, that's called the T-zone. And the T-zone is the most important area to keep clean. And for over 12 years, there's this product called TheraWorks Protect. It's been used by millions of emergency room patients and medical clinics to support infection prevention. TheraWorks Protect is easy to use, and it's safe to apply several times a day on your hands and around your nose and eyes and mouth, better known again as the T-zone. Just apply a small amount into your hand and rub it in until it dries, and then apply another amount and rub it all over your T-zone. Finding hand sanitizer sometimes can be difficult, and now you can order TheraWorks Protect online. Just get it directly from them. Go to TZoneProtect.com and use the Bubba Kicker. When you use the Bubba /, you're going to get 20% off and free freight, and you're going to have it in a few days. Again, TZoneProtect.com /Bubba. Start protecting yourself and the ones that you love now.
Homeowners, do you have trees that are dangerously close to your home that can do a lot of damage?
Oops.
Well, ABC 1-2 Tree offers experienced, fully insured professionals at honest, affordable prices. Their equipment is state-of-the-art. They use the safest practices in the industry. They have 5-star Google reviews. ABC 1-2 Tree only employs certified arborists. Call them at 727-522-8733. That's 727-522-8733. Or go to abc12tree.com.
Hello, David Gornoski here. And hello to Tampa Bay, 1040 a.m. across Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg, and Brandon, Sarasota, all the wonderful cities that we cover on Radio Land. And then also, greetings to our friends in News Radio WFLA Orlando on iHeartRadio there. And worldwide, our growing and expanding national audience. Some of you find us in my column at Daily Caller and Town Hall Finance, Newsmax, all the different news sites, Christian Post and Fee.org, LouRockwell.com, all kinds of news sites that cover our pieces. We welcome all of you as well. Happy to have you with us. And if you're following us online, you want to like or subscribe or share and all that thing. I refuse to say hit the bell. I'm just not going to do that here. That's too much of an ask. But if you want to do that, you can do that. But we're here on live today talking to Blake Boles, who he's got the new book, Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? And, Blake, I think what you're doing is you're just trying to give people options to consider that perhaps they weren't thinking about before, right?
Yeah, that's right, David.
So, you've worked in education and working with kids and camp and stuff. What's the least thing you like about your work with kids?
Wow, I've never been asked that question before.
Well, I had to do something different, right?
Yeah. Well, working in the summer camp world, working in travel programs, sometimes you can only work with upper middle class families, and there is this little part of me, as I told you earlier, I did think about becoming a public school science teacher. There is part of me that would like the opportunity to work with people all across the income spectrum, but I've mostly ended up working with people who can afford to do summer camps and travel programs. And, it's hard for me to say that that's actually a problem, because I've worked with some really great, wonderful, lovely young adults. But it'd be nice if I could figure out a way to work with everyone and still pay myself, because I feel like I'm sort of homeless in the world of education. If I want to do this sort of alternative and experiential education, there's just no place for me in a public education system. So that's how I've ended up here.
Public school teachers have reported to me over the years that they've noticed an increasing level of malaise from the students and blatant disrespect that passes past generations of students that they've taught. Have you experienced that in your engagement with teenagers and so on?
I really haven't. And I feel bad for those teachers, because I believe them that it's true. And I wonder if it's just a reflection of the amount of coercion and clamping down on the students, which has been happening maybe in the forms of these kind of ridiculous standardized tests, in the form of more homework, in the form of more seat time in classes. I mean, could it be as simple as that? If we try to control kids more in these ways that kids can't understand? There's one thing about legitimate authority. People will follow someone they recognize to be a leader for a good reason. And then there's illegitimate authority. And, then that's when kids become subversive. That's when they'll push back. That's when they'll give you sass. And so maybe the relationship between these two phenomena could be as simple as that.
What's the surprising thing that you've learned about kids and educating along the way in your journey of engaging?
Oh, yeah. what I've learned working with kids who are allowed to be very free and very self-directed is that they will often spend large amounts of time, sometimes years, seeming to do nothing that an adult would look at and consider productive. And what's really happening under the surface oftentimes is that this kid is doing a hard reset on their motivational system. They're going from extrinsically motivated to intrinsically motivated. And oftentimes that means they're allowing themselves to feel boredom. And it's really crappy to feel bored all the time. It's just a miserable state of being. And so you have to experience that at least a little bit to know how miserable it is. And so these same kids who seem to be bored and disengaged, and it's like they're not taking advantage of their freedom, these are the kids who will rapidly turn around once they discover something that motivates them and engages them and work their butts off and work super hard to, let's say, jump through the hoops to get into the college program that they want or the trade school that they're interested in. Or they see a job that they want. They will make it happen because they have been allowed to experience the fact that if they don't make something happen for themselves, no one else is going to do it for them. Mom and dad might be able to help a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're on your own, kid. And that is a message, a fundamental message of freedom and responsibility, which so many kids are not allowed to experience today. And that's what I want to bring back, so to speak.
What's one word that encapsulates your feelings about the future of education?
Oh, man. Well, it's kind of trite to say it, but individualized. We have had systems of education that consider kids to be these fungible, replaceable cogs, and that just cannot continue. The world of work is already moving in the direction of being much more individualized. There's tens of thousands of jobs out there for people nowadays, and education can only go in the same direction. It has to go in the same direction. We have to stop thinking about kids as these big groups, as masses to be dealt with, and instead think about them as individuals and as small teams.
Very good. It's a pleasure hearing from Blake Boles, and I want everybody to check out his book, Why Are You Still Sending Your Kids to School? It's a great question, folks. Let's think about it, and let's act on that challenge, because why not? We don't have to continue to put up with the status quo. If we want to change the future, it starts with the way we raise human beings. Give them their freedom back. Give them their dignity back. Let's set them free. I'm David Gornoski. We'll see you in just a moment for Hour 2 of A Neighbor's Choice.